Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Dirks, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Best Practices in Defining a Collection Development Strategy and Evaluating Business Models for eBooks, which is sponsored by Springer Nature. Today's discussion is one in a series of webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a couple of features of the webinar software. For all of you joining the presentation as attendees, please note that you are automatically muted and your cameras are disabled. So don't worry about generating noise or feedback. We have that taken care of. In the main area of the screen as well, you should be able to follow along with the presentation materials. And we're using the Q&A feature today with the ability to upvote. So if you see other folks' questions that are of interest to you, please feel free to upvote those questions. And if you have questions of your own that you don't see there already, please drop them into the Q&A box. We'll take a little time at the end of the presentation for a really dedicated Q&A, and we may have some time for a bit at the end of our first presentation as well. Please also note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to that archived version. Our speakers today are Jessica Morales, J. Parker Ladwig, and Wouter van der Velde. Jessica has served in various collection strategy and acquisition roles throughout her career. As the current Director of Collection Strategy and Acquisitions at the University of Notre Dame, she provides leadership for collection strategy, scholarly resource assessment, electronic resource management, and acquisition services. Jessica has presented and published on user experience, electronic resource management, and collection assessment. She is also interested in leadership models and change management. She holds a BA in art history and an MLIS in library and information science. Jessica is a mom to one son and loves hiking and beach days with her husband and child. James Parker Ladwig is the mathematics and life sciences librarian and a strategic resource. Let me check that, is the Scholarly Resources Assessment Librarian at the University of Notre Dame. He has worked at Notre Dame for more than 20 years, and he graduated from the University of Texas in Austin with an MLIS and worked for 5 years at McKinsey & Company's petroleum practice as an information specialist, then research analyst. He's published in the areas of strategic planning, collection analysis, censorship, syllabi studies, and communities of practice. He's particularly interested in quantitative analysis and data visualization, including helping colleagues appreciate the power of statistics. He's been most active with the Special Libraries Association's Physics, Astronomy, Mathematics Division, and served a 3-year term as Division Chair-elect, Chair, and Past Chair. He has 5 children and 2 daughters-in-law, ranging in age from 18 to 26. And Wouter van der Velde is the Senior eProduct Manager, eBooks, and actually, let me check that too. He's actually the Senior Manager at the Book Solutions Portfolio, Research Sales at Springer Nature. He was instrumental in the creation and launch of the eBooks products back in 2007 and continues today to be responsible for eBook product management strategy, product development, and product technology developments, and a number of collaborations across this product at Springer Nature. In this position, Wouter is responsible for communication of MARC records and MyCopy, as well as business models and pricing. And with that, with the introductions out of the way, we are ready to get started. So I will turn things over to Jessica.
Thank you, Mark, for the introductions. All right, and can you see my slides? Okay, great. So today, Parker and I are going to discuss best practices around defining a collection development strategy and evaluating business models for eBooks.
And so we thought we would include this quote from a recent publication from ACRL Choice. Uh, we think it sums up pretty nicely the ebook landscape for all of us. I'll start with some facts and figures about Notre Dame and the Hesburgh libraries. Information is there about Notre Dame. The one thing I'll add is that we do have a law school, but we don't have a medical school. For the Hesburgh libraries itself, you'll see our acquisitions budget is $12.9 million. Of that, $8.7 million is continuations, primarily serials, and $4.2 million is one-time purchases. About 600,000 of that 4.2 is committed to ebook packages. The rest of that one-time funding is for a mix of print and ebooks, with print still predominating. I'll also note that we have 53 faculty, of whom 25 are subject librarians in one capacity or another. And this is a photograph of our very beautiful library, Touchdown Jesus.
So defining a collection development strategy and evaluating business models really begins with support from the upper level administration. The first level of support comes in the form of staffing positions whose roles and responsibilities support data-informed decision-making, which is really the backbone of our collection strategy approach. I've highlighted 4 areas that support collection development strategy here. The first being strategic direction, then stewardship of the budget, content selection, and data gathering and analysis, along with product evaluation. Within our organization, these responsibilities are upheld by a variety of positions. In this slide, those positions that are listed at the very top of the list are closely aligned with the daily operations of that area. And I'll briefly go over all the roles that are represented here. So the program director, which in our organization is akin to a department head in many other organizations, focuses on the strategic direction, stewardship of central funds, setting priorities across the program, and also participates in negotiations. The collection data analyst is responsible for gathering, analyzing, and preparing reports, and his efforts help inform selection and deselection of our collections. Our electronic resources associates handle the day-to-day management of operations, specifically around electronic resources. They provide support for data gathering as well, for smaller scale projects and also for ad hoc requests. They also address access issues and note the quality of support that we receive on the provider's end. We recently underwent a reorganization and now have subject librarians spread across multiple programs. Most of the subject librarians have dual responsibilities depending on their overall workload, including responsibilities for scholarly resources assessment, such like Parker's role. Subject librarians are really our conduit to our faculty and help us truly understand the needs for research and teaching, and they also steward funds assigned to support specific disciplines. Our associate university librarian, as well as our university librarian, set the strategic direction and objectives, and they also set priorities at the highest level. And last, but certainly not least, our Office of Finance and Administration works closely with us on collection strategy. They set the budget every year, and they also help us with forecasting.
So as Jessica mentioned, I'm one of the SRA, Scholarly Resources Assessment Librarians. As a team, the SRA librarians collectively serve as a collection strategies network, working across divisions, programs, and units to facilitate discussion regarding library collections. We're responsible for managing discussion around collection growth, disposition, renewals, shared print initiatives, and collaborative funding approaches. We're also a voice for the library's key stakeholders and advocates, and advocate for policies, practices, process improvement, and share concerns in the best interest of all constituents. I work with the STEM and business subject librarians, My colleague Mark Robinson works with the social sciences librarians, and my colleague Julia Schneider works with the humanities, arts, and architecture librarians.
On the last slide, I mentioned strategic direction being an instrumental component of collection development strategy, and I wanted to highlight that area again here. I'm sure we are not alone in tackling competing priorities and managing a constant influx of projects and new ideas. And the way that we are able to balance all of this in our organization is throughout the strategic initiative process. Strategic initiatives carry weight within our organization and they guide priorities at every level. This academic year, one of our strategic initiatives is to develop scalable, strategic, and responsive collections that advance teaching and research, and to do this within a sustainable budget. As we often read in the literature and engage in conversations amongst colleagues throughout the profession, the user-related advantages of eBooks are well known and significant. And preference for format no longer holds the weight that it once did. However, at the University of Notre Dame, we are still a bit behind in that trend. Just 4 years ago, we moved to an e-preferred model for our collections. The driving factors behind the decision were cost, space, and time, with many circumstances falling into all three of these buckets. As we moved toward adopting an e-preferred model, we examined our historical print purchasing trends, particularly looking at publishers and subjects and circulation history. We already had a fair number of eBooks in our collection, and we're also able to consider that data in this context as well. On a larger organizational level, we were looking for ways to reduce the amount of time that was spent on individual title level selection so we could focus more energies on other strategic areas such as data management, teaching, and outreach. As we moved into the implementation phase of our ePreferred strategy, we let those pieces of data from the evaluation phase guide our implementation, which resulted in us focusing on front list collection purchases with specific publishers.
Yeah, and I will also note that, of course, there are some differences among broad subject areas in implementation because of disciplinary practices. STEM librarians were the first to adopt to an e-preferred strategy because of their long-standing experience with e-journals. Then the social sciences librarians and the humanities librarians' adoption has been a little bit slower, of course.
I wanted to revisit our largest influential factor that informed the decision to adopt ePreferred, which you can easily see from this graph. Over time, our print collection, which is represented here by the blue circles, continued to grow and grow, while the percentage of the collection that circulated was dwindling. This growth rate was not sustainable in terms of the space that we had available, and this is also taking into consideration a relatively new offsite annex space that we have. Now that we have our organizational support in place, momentum has been built, we can really begin to focus on our local needs and priorities and examining how various ebook business models can support us in meeting our goals. Our primary goal, which I'm sure is similar to most on this call, is to support research and teaching on campus through access to our scholarly resources. Again, keeping that responsible stewardship of funds in mind. So we naturally seek out options that provide the longer term cost sustainability that we seek. When examining the available ebook purchase models, we particularly found evidence-based acquisition models to provide us with the flexibility we need in terms of cost, while simultaneously making a large amount of content available. This is particularly of importance to us for STEM resources where we have budget constraints. Of course, all EBAs are built a little different, and we certainly prefer and prioritize those that include frontlist content. Previously, I mentioned that we were looking to return capacity to our library faculty. so we could prioritize other initiatives. One of the ways that we have been able to accomplish this is through collection purchases. So by switching to publisher-based e-approval models, as well as firm order subject collections, we're able to reduce the amount of time that was spent on those title level selections. Another one of our priorities we have is reducing barriers for the end user, and we have found demand-driven acquisition models beneficial in accomplishing this goal. However, there are challenges, as we know, in balancing this when it comes to platform preference as well as DRM restrictions. And we'll never be able to provide immediate access to every ebook available, at least within the models that the current marketplace offers. So we will continue to get title level subscription requests and continue to use the firm order single title purchases to fill those types of requests. We have personally moved away from subscription-based ebook models, and this is due to a high priority of ownership, or rather perpetual rights, over than access model. We used to have a substantial print approval plan in place, which has decreased significantly in size over the past several years. However, we continue to examine best approaches here. Earlier this fiscal year, we considered shifting our entire plan to E, and then we considered shifting portions of the plan to E. However, after working with our vendor and really understanding the cost implications, we decided that we would hold on making that decision. I do want to give the caveat about my mentions of returning capacity in a certain area, because that's only true for one portion. We certainly saw an increase in the support that we needed in managing our electronic resources content. And we were able to meet some of those needs through our reorganization.
And as Jessica was talking about local needs and the business models, she did mention some of the challenges influencing our decisions. This is a little bit longer list. I won't go through it extensively. I will mention duplication control as an example, though. So not only do we have to think about duplication between print and ebooks, but we also have to think about duplication among ebook platforms or business models. I'd like to turn now to talk a little bit about the data behind the decisions. And of course, while evaluating a product and after its acquisition, the return on investment or the cost per use should be assessed. Demand, of course, is measured not only by hard numbers like usage data, but also by qualitative data like a subject librarian's evaluation or feedback from users. One particular challenge is defining low use. If you note that more than half of print books acquired by a library never circulate, even one use of an ebook is good. But when evaluating a subject collection, for example, do we focus on the total usage of the entire collection, or do we focus on the highest used individual titles? In terms of cost includes not only the overall purchase price or annual subscription, but the cost of acquiring MARC or RDA metadata and ongoing maintenance costs. That is the product easy to keep up, or does it require a lot of attention? Sometimes the cost per unit or per ebook is helpful, for example, if you could purchase individual titles through an EBA model, but sometimes it isn't. Why look at unit cost when a subject collection of hundreds of books is the only option? Other criteria, of course, factor into the evaluation of the products that we've purchased. For example, the quality of the interface, the relationship with the vendor, changes in consortial deals, etc.
So I've shared that we're a little behind the curve on adopting an Eve preferred approach. Some of the factors that may be attributed to this are our historical heavy emphasis on the humanities, as well as the fact that pre-pandemic, we did not offer online classes except on limited and rare occasions. Also, our students are required to live on campus for their first 3 years, and many of them choose to remain on campus all 4 years. So remote learning as a result of the pandemic has really been a catalyst for us in fully embracing eBooks. The end user advantages of eBooks that we might not have appreciated fully before were immediately highlighted when we moved to remote learning. We also saw a huge increase in demand for electronic content from our faculty and students that we weren't seeing before. During this period, many publishers made content freely accessible, which allowed us to make some data-informed decisions in a commitment-free environment. Having this experience really kind of boosted the confidence that we had in our collection strategy plan. Of course, this also had its setbacks when access was removed and we had funding hardships, and we weren't able to move forward with specific purchases. Prior to the pandemic, we were also pretty lenient in duplication of electronic and print, and we have seen those requests dwindle.
I will note on this slide too, that there was a question about what do you do with textbooks that were originally put on reserve. The pandemic has been a catalyst for us to seek approaches where we could do that a little bit better. So that is one of those end user advantages that's come up recently.
So as we continually examine our strategies and look to optimize collection building, we frequently examine where we are, where we want to be, and those steps that are going to get us there. We've done a lot in terms of shifting our strategy in the past couple of years, and we are currently in a period of review and examination. We're looking at the sustainability of our past choices and making sure that it makes sense for us to continue on with those. One of the ways that we have done that is by looking at our return on investment. So we've specifically looked at our overall percentages of titles used in a package, how many years it takes for a specific package to get to 50% or 60% of that content being used, and are we even hitting that marker? We are also preparing to launch a community of practice under one of our strategic initiatives to build a shared understanding through dialogue amongst our subject librarians about collection building approaches, along with other topics related to collections. We are committed to moving away from, as Parker likes to put it, chasing the latest, hottest deal and really focusing on our priorities. It's easy to kind of get caught up in the momentum of like, oh, this is a really good idea, and for you to shift away from your priorities. So we're making conscious efforts there to align those two. Upcoming, we'll be looking at ways to more systematically gather qualitative data from our end users and start incorporating that into our decision making, and also ways to regularize our ongoing evaluation. So in conclusion of our portion of the discussion, we really want to emphasize that the strategy you develop to meet your own institutional goals should really drive your decision making, aligning your priorities with the available ebook models and products. And don't lose focus of your evaluation criteria and the data that's available to you. If you don't see an option that fits your needs, advocate for one. We've been able to successfully work with publishers and vendors to put in place models that weren't initially offered. And now I will pass it off to Wouter.
Excellent. I think Wouter, if you want to jump in, maybe we'll take a little time at the end to answer some of the questions that are in the queue. So I will just, as Jessica did, pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope the screen sharing is working fine.
It looks good.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wouter van der Velde. I work at Springer Nature, and I've been involved with our eBooks business for quite a while now. So as part of when we first started with eBooks over 12 years ago or 13 years ago, we started to look at how our customers would best license our book collections. And we first started with a steps approach to building an ebook collection shortly after. And last year we revised this again based on the experience we had, also with the feedback we got from our customers. So we put together a white paper that highlights the 8 steps to building an ebook collection. And this is, in a sense, publisher or vendor agnostic. And when I go through each of the 8 steps, I do want to highlight a couple of things that we have to offer in terms of these 8 steps. And I'm also happy that to see that the steps that both Parker and Jessica were talking about are reflected in this as well. So the first step when it comes to building your ebook collection is the definition of your collection development strategy. And I can imagine, and Parker and Jessica emphasized that as well, that particularly in the last year with the pandemic going on, this might have shifted and changed a lot. So use the data you have at hand. Use the people that are working with your students, with your researchers, to see how you can best serve them, and determine whether you want to go for the quantity in collections, or if you need individual titles in other subject areas or in certain book types. When you've set your strategy, your content strategy, look at the available business models for the content that you need. Look at aspects such as the amount of concurrent users, the amount of seats that are needed. For instance, for textbooks, you could easily have needed 20 to 50 seats if all students in one classroom would need a book at the same time. Are books available in packages? Do you need the entire subject area? Is there enough demand for a subject area, or do you need to go for individual titles? Does the vendor provide you with MARC records, with metadata? The MARC records or catalog books have at least twice the amount of usage as uncatalogued books. Do you need to book only for a short period of time, or is continuous access ownership needed for it? What is your preferred platform? Is the publisher platform okay, or do you prefer an aggregator platform, or both? Or are you platform agnostic? Because it could very well be that users are getting to the content through your catalog anyways. And finally, how is the content available? What is the publication quality? Is it only just flat scanned PDFs, or is also, for instance, EPUB available? Is the content available also in HTML? And finally, what kind of digital preservation is options are available? Is the content, in case of a trigger event, which doesn't seem that unlikely nowadays, still disposable through, for instance, clocks, logs, Portico? Does the vendor work with those initiatives? Now, I quickly want to go through a couple of the business models that we have available around our ebooks. We started off with a collections approach when we first launched in 2007. And during all those years, we've piloted several different business models. We've piloted with evidence-based, with access-only business models, and also individual titles, smaller chunks of content. And last year, late last year, we launched a new set of business models, our flexible ebook solutions. And these comprise 4 solutions. Within the 4 solutions, or a combination of these, it should fit the strategy, the content acquisition strategy that you have. All of our solutions, our models, come with continuous access options when needed. And obviously, what we always started off with, there is no digital rights management on the content. So our 4 solutions, starting at the top left, obviously our collections approach. We have 21 subject-specific collections available in our English International Language content, with new books added every year, always the front list available. A new option that we have is on the right of that, Access and Select. This is a suite of evidence-based business models where you have the flexibility to get access to a large pool of content and in the end select titles based on the product plan, select titles that you want to keep forever in your collection. There are different options available within this to tailor to your needs. Then going to the right bottom, we have our single titles option. You can select individual books that are available on Springer Link, and we will open up only those titles that you have selected. Again, all of these models are without digital rights management, and on the single titles model, you will get continuous access, no limitations on the number of concurrent users, and it includes all of our book types. Then finally, on the bottom left, we have our reference modules. We have a large set of reference content available, and this tertiary literature is split into 5 different modules that we have available in 2 different ways, either with a license of 12 months of access only, or with a continuous access component added to that. Then if you have questions, detailed questions on any of these models, then please visit our website. Also, this the final slide of this deck will contain all of the URLs that we'll happily provide afterwards. So continuing in the 8 steps, coming to step 3, pool resources to reduce costs. And previously I was talking about our different business model options. It helps, and whatever fits within your content acquisition strategy. It could be that you will have to team up with other faculties in order to get a more cost-effective collection. So inform also with the vendor how flexible they can be with splitting invoices or and or giving cross departmental access to the content. Many vendors are happy to work with you to see which business model fits best to the content that you require, and also how you can team up with other departments that might have a similar and overlapping content need as you have. Step 4, review your acquisitions policy. Before any new ebook collection is ordered, budget and policy reviews within library liaisons and are key to understand the latest users' behaviors and needs. Parker and Jessica were also talking about this, to keep a constant line of communication open on qualitative data from your end users. So make your collection decisions and secure your budget approval by department or subject area together with your subject liaisons. Define the usage profile for a collection or a discipline and see how that impacts a vendor choice, or even within one vendor or publisher, their collection. Review their licensing agreements. And finally, your availability of budget. Get an estimate on the number of concurrent content users and factor in their search behaviors. Many vendors can supply you with usage and denial statistics that can help you make the right decisions about how to build your collection. And finally, assess the costs associated with specialist storage of archives in contrary to your ebook collections. Shelf space can be quite costly, and also the circulation cost can be quite high. And particularly now with a lot of remote access, an accelerated e-transition is what we see happening currently as well. Step 5, integrate collections and boost discovery. I mentioned before, an catalog book has at least twice the amount of usage as a non-catalog book. Many of your users are using your catalog to get to the content, but also Google and link resolvers. Make sure to enable those. See what the vendor provides you with in terms of metadata and support for link resolvers. And in line with link resolvers, which is one aspect of promotion, but also promote and promote again. Use any resource that a publisher or of a vendor has available to you to make sure that the collection that you purchase with them is known to your end users. Also, we have a dedicated website with a lot of promotional tools that we supply that can help you promote the content if you have purchased any of our ebook collections or our ebooks. Make sure to get in touch with us or with any of the other vendors to get on-site or remote training options, banner ads, posters, promotional ads. Use email, use your intranet, and also don't forget social media to promote your collections and spread the word. And don't do it just once. Keep on promoting what you have. Step 7, digital preservation. Like I said in the beginning, digital preservation is particularly important in case of a trigger event, which could be a flooding of a server area in a country where your content is hosted. Or it could even be a pandemic, as we see now happening. Digital preservation is more important than ever. So ask your vendor what partnerships they have. We are working with a large array of national initiatives like national libraries, but also our books content is archived in initiatives such as clocks, locks, and we have an agreement with Portico to ensure that the content is safe over time. So whatever happens to us, you will always get, you will always be able to access the content that you acquired from us. And finally, at the end of the whole cycle is review and renew. Look at usage. Look at usage in the collection. You look at denials. What else is needed? See if the usage is still matching with the business models that you are using to license the content, or if you need to upgrade or downgrade in certain subject areas to match whatever your users are needing. Talk to your researchers and students and how they're accessing and reading the content in the collection. See how they are they're using the content on campus or off campus. Are they using remote access options, and assess how this best fits with the content that you're getting. And finally, how frequently are users printing or ordering print versions of the text? This is something that you will need to get through surveys, because that's unfortunately not covered in any usage stats. And that brings me to the end of this. In short, the 8 steps. Define your collection strategy, your collection development strategy. Evaluate the business models. Look whatever is out there and match that to your own strategy. Team up with others in your organization to see if you can reduce cost. Consult with liaison librarians. Integrate your collections and boost discovery. Make sure that your content is used. And also promote and keep on promoting. Make sure that whatever you acquire is digitally preserved for the future. And assess again what has happened in that whole cycle. Review the statistics. Talk to your end users, how they experience the collection that you have available to them, and probably redefine or adjust your collection development strategy, and start the whole thing from the start again. The final slide I have is a set of useful links. All of these, including a white paper that expands on these 8 steps, is available through springernature.com/ebooks. And when we make these slides available, we can also make sure that all of these links are available to you. And that concludes my presentation. So I'd like to hand back to Mark and see if there are any questions either from me or Jessica or Parker.
Thank you, Wouter. We have a great many questions in the queue, as I'm sure folks out there can see as we transition here into this Q&A period. I would encourage you, if you have additional questions that you don't see already reflected here, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. And if you see a question here that you think is a good one, please feel free to click the little thumb underneath it to upvote it. Looking at the questions that we have here, we've had a few that have had some answers typed to them that Parker and Jessica were answering as we went along. But I think we'll take a minute to just hit maybe the most upvoted questions and a few others that I think the panelists have expressed an interest in. So just looking at the number of upvotes, we have a question from Melinda that asks, what percentage of reduction in the print collection has occurred over this time period? And if I remember, that was going back to 1997. Would you like to speak to that, Parker, maybe to start out? And I think you're muted. Yeah.
I'm going to defer to Jessica.
Okay.
What I said was we are acquiring less print, but still a lot. But Jessica, I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah. So we don't have the specific numbers of percentages on how much our print collection has declined. It's really more focused on like the decline in what we are purchasing. We don't deaccession a lot from our collection. We do use our offsite annex facility to help facilitate that process. So that's kind of been a historical practice of us, is we retain our print. But I don't have the numbers, but I will, if you want to send me an email, I would be happy to follow up and share that with you.
Excellent. And sorting through the questions a little, we have a question here from Mark that says, I'd be interested to receive your perspectives about what principles or practices in this discussion may prove most useful for the academic library at a small institution. And he gives some percentages there with some specific nursing, counseling, business, and education as sort of the specialties. Are there things that apply more to smaller institutions, do you think?
I think for me, the biggest concept that like stands out and kind of our lessons learned is really having that strong understanding of what you want to accomplish and what your priorities are and the criteria that you use to evaluate. Because as we alluded to, I know we're all managing a lot, we're all juggling a lot of different responsibilities, and it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the moment. You get an email that says, look at this like great new deal, and you're like, that is a good deal, and you start pursuing that, and it's easy to lose track of like those other pieces. So I think the more time that you can invest in those areas to make sure that those offers are really fitting your needs, the better off that you would be.
Yeah, and I think Jessica also mentioned during our presentation that sometimes when you don't see a particular business model from a publisher, a vendor, it never hurts to ask or advocate for that because others may be interested in the same sort of model.
Yeah, and I can just share a little bit more detail. So we've certainly been offered like, somebody else's EBA might look a little bit different than another like publisher or content provider's EBA. And through dialogue and having that open communication, we can share like, we're doing this over here. And we've been able to make some like fine tune adjustments or put in like new models such as like e-approval plans that weren't originally being offered. So that has also been really beneficial.
Great. So looking at our questions here, we have one that has sort of surged to the top from Jan. And Jan says, thank you, Springer, for finally offering single title purchases. However, a minimum of 20 titles per order and needing to order direct through Springer Link doesn't work with our volume of needed Springer titles and our purchasing workflow. I'd suspect other smaller library workflows as well. The option to order via Gobi or some other vendor for a single title would be helpful. Is that something that Springer is working on as another avenue for purchasing?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this moment, this is only short after we launched this and the other business models, and we have to, or we are developing online tools to help selecting and acquiring individual titles, but also supporting other business models. So there's a massive project ongoing to allow these kind of easiness of purchasing options.
Excellent. Great. I know that there's a question here coming through from Andrea from a little while ago. And Andrea asks, what changes did you make in reserve materials? Do you still have a reserve print collection? And how does that work with, everything going on now with perhaps less access to the library than was traditional?
Yes, so I will take this one. And I'm also going to, Mark, if you don't mind, couple in textbooks, because I saw textbooks were also mentioned in some of the questions. So we don't we do not purchase textbooks. I would say as part of policy, but we don't have a lot of written policies around these, but it's not our practice to purchase textbooks. So that isn't a high priority area that we support. But in terms of reserves, we do have a robust reserves service. So we are currently working on putting a controlled digital lending in place, and we are working through working with our legal counsel on the right ways to put that in place, and also looking at the technical aspects. I'm not closely involved in those discussions, but our plans are that we will be able to offer that service beginning this spring semester. So that's one way that we are able to do that. We also provide document delivery and electronic document delivery within the copyright guidelines. And again, that is a highly utilized service. That was one of the services that we prioritized when we were strictly remote learning. So we did have a small subset of staff going in when the rest of the library was closed and upholding that service point for us. I should mention that we are in person. So this past fall semester, we were in person. And the ways that we were able to minimize that, again, is through electronic delivery for document delivery. We also expanded that service. So prior to the pandemic, it was only available to faculty and graduate students, but we were allowing undergraduates to participate in that as well.
Excellent. And I see that you've clicked on that question as well. Wouter, do you have anything to add here?
No, I accidentally clicked on that one. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Excellent. All right. Going through, looking at the questions we've got, and thank you everyone out there for all of the questions. We have one here from Jamie who asks, without renewing subscription ebooks, what platforms do you use to host ebooks? Jamie says, we have EBSCOhost and ProQuest platforms, but we also have both of their ebook subscriptions too. So how do you host your ebooks?
So we do prioritize publisher platforms. We hear that a lot from our colleagues and subject librarians, as well as from our users. So we do prioritize those first, and we prioritize those as well on the title level selections that we make. We try to focus on our DDA around the ProQuest platform, but we still do have some content on EBSCO. So that's a bit of a struggle. We have it everywhere, and it's just a challenge that we have.
And Jessica, did you want to talk about why we stopped the subscription model with ProQuest?
So we stopped the subscription model based on our priorities. We really prioritize having that perpetual term access and versus over the access model, and also the duplication control. So we have a lot going on. We have a lot of ebooks on a lot of different platforms, and managing all of these different models, it's challenging to control that duplication. So we found that with removing the subscription, that was also another way that we could manage that duplication, and just also manage the unpredictable nature of the subscription models that is a little easier to manage with EBAs and DDAs, as well as outright purchases.
Excellent. I know that this is sort of a perpetual problem with ebooks that comes up. But we have here a question from Denise that came through a little while ago. How do you deal with faculty that are e-resistant? And I might tag on to that. Have you noticed a decline in the e-resistance of faculty as, in the pandemic, as more folks are operating remotely?
Yeah, and I can take that one since I work directly with faculty. My first note is that for Notre Dame, our strategy is any preferred strategy, and not something else. So if a faculty member really wants or needs the print, we can accommodate that. I will say, of course, too, with the pandemic, some of the e-resistant faculty have seen the benefits of eBooks and are moving in that. On a sort of kind of funny note, I still have science faculty who are resistant to e-journals 20 years after e-journals have been around. So yeah, I think there are always going to be somebody.
Yes, I think that's probably the case. It's human nature to to prefer certain things. We have a question here that's labeled as coming from, oh, and there it just dropped away. Let's move on to a different question then. All right, from Lakeland College, that says, how do you deal with titles that were initially available in print and are then converted to e-format, but with publication date that shows that it's a new book, but it's the same thing that the print book was? Does that present problems to you in cataloging and dealing with the e-version of the title?
Yeah, Mark, and I'm looking to Jessica, but I'm also throw in one other question from Lucy that said, I've noticed medical text e-versions of the book come out 6 months to a year and change later. Have you encountered this delay? And how are you handling it? So the question really is about when the e differs or is the same as print and how we handle that.
So in terms of like the metadata piece and the cataloging piece, I can't really answer that. So that part of the operation happens in our metadata services program, and they handle those. But I do know from working closely with them that we certainly have challenges there, and would like to see improvements and stronger partnerships with our publishers and vendors and metadata suppliers on the other end. But we do receive initial inquiries about that, because our team handles support service tickets. So that often comes up where we will have end users asking, and that's often how we kind of come across those cases. And we often look to our publishers to help us like clarify those questions. So I'm sorry, I got a little off track with the coupling. Did I answer the question?
Well, I will say, as a subject librarian, it's good. Jessica mentioned our community of practice that we're strengthening and building with our subject librarians, that as we run across issues like that as individual subject librarians, that we can share that with others, bring that to the attention of acquisitions and metadata, and then slowly begin to find solutions, even if we don't have an answer right now.
Excellent. And I would note, for those of you looking for the link to the ebook, you should be able to find that in the Q&A. So if you have any trouble with that, and we can provide it to you after the presentation as well, if you're looking for that link. All right, maybe we have time for one more question. Maybe we will take this last one from Joanna here, who says, do you use IP address ranges or single sign-on with an authentication product for access? Have you had to prioritize vendors based on their access models? Is that one of the things that you factor in?
We do use IP ranges for our primary access, but we can also support single sign-on. So we're lucky to be able to offer both, but IP is our current. Yep, and that isn't as much of a point weighing into our priorities.
Okay. That makes sense. All right. Well, looking at the time here, we're fast coming up on the end of the hour. So I would like to take just a minute to say thank you so much, Jessica and Parker and Wouter, for putting together these presentations, for answering questions on the fly, and for all of your work in these presentations. We really appreciate it. And I would just say to folks here at the end, thank you for joining us out there. We really appreciate your taking the time to sit in on this presentation. We hope that you found it useful and interesting. And we hope to see you in the near future on another webinar. As we sign out here, if you have a minute to fill out a brief survey, it should populate automatically in your browser. We'd really appreciate some responses in there. That helps us fine tune these programs. And lastly, I will say, if we did not get to your questions, we apologize. We do have a record of them. And the limits of time simply do not allow us to respond to everything. So thank you again, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in the near future. Bye-bye.